in 75. I retired and moved up here. But I had the place since 57. I used to use it as a weekend house, and that's where I always went and got drunk.
Henry Gage was governor of California at the turn of the 20th century, and he also happened to own a number of gold mines out in Acton. Tonight we're going to take a look at Acton in the time of Henry Gage. I'm Leon Warden, and this is Legacy, Santa Clarita's Living History. We took the cameras out to Acton recently and tagged along with the High Desert Cruisers, who went on a trip of historic Acton that was organized by the Acton Women's Club. Tonight with us we have the president and treasurer of the Acton Women's Club, Tina Steibel and Kathleen Larsen. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. Thank you for having us.
Now, Acton today is a kind of a sprawling place, but it didn't always used to be. It actually had an old downtown. Are there still relics out there?
Oh my goodness, yes. A lot of people discover things doing their gardening, and just by interviewing many people, we found a lot of relics.
A lot of old buildings too, right?
Mm-hmm. A lot of old buildings. Many are still there from the 1880s, 1889, 1890.
One of those 1890 buildings was the Soledad School. And that's actually our first stop on this tour, so let's take a look at that now.
Behind me here is the red brick schoolhouse. It's actually the Soledad School, which later became known as the red brick schoolhouse. The bricks for the schoolhouse were fired right here. They were made right here in Acton. And we have Alberta here because for us, this is history, and for her, she lived this. How long have you lived here, Alberta?
88 years.
88 years. Wow. So you would walk to school?
Oh, not very often.
Not very often? How did you get there?
My dad would take me to Ravenna. My very first year in grammar school, first grade, my dad took me to Ravenna. He put me on the passenger train, and I rode from Ravenna to Acton, and then got off at the station here in Acton, then walked across the path to this school.
How many people went to school here, Alberta, that was in your classroom?
20, 30.
20 to 30?
But there was only 4 in my graduating class when I was in 8th grade.
Wow. Was there electricity, plumbing, bathrooms here?
That's all a problem. There were no electricity, no running water, and the little boys and girls' johns were in opposite side of the backyard.
Obviously a little different than kind of the pampered life we live today. Actually, the decision to build the school was in 1888, and there was the Little White Schoolhouse, which was built first, and then this was the replacement for that. In 1892, they installed was actually a church bell, and in the schoolhouse, and this was later moved. Actually, the schoolhouse here served for 50 years, and but eventually, due to some of the hardships with the heating, water, and everything else, a new school was built, and that's the Acton School. And the bell was relocated from here, and it's down there now. So it's still there.
All right. Well, our next stop is going to be straight down the street. That is Mayor Cal's home. And we're going to talk about his home and the hotel.
Well, Tina, you mentioned that we're going out to Mayor Cal's home. Now, tell me why this house is historic.
Well, this house was built by Rudolph Eugene Nickel, who became known as the father of Acton, in 1895.
How did he come to be known as the father of Acton?
He was a very political man and interested in developing the city, and had a lot of friends who could help him in that way. He brought in the post office, a general merchandise store, sold all kinds of remedies, and just whatever the miners needed in the area, and he kept saying that Acton is okay.
Okay, well, let's go take a look at his house.
How long have you lived here?
Since actually living here was in 75. I retired and moved up here. But I had the place since 57.
Good year.
So I used to use it as a weekend house. And that's where I always went and got drunk.
Have Have there been any changes to your home since the home was built?
Yeah, let me go in the house and I'll get a picture what it used to look like.
Oh, well, okay.
And I'll bring it out. And
Okay.
hope the dogs don't get out and bite you. Go back, go back. Get back. Get back. Now, it's not very plain. It was all a shiplap, if you know what that is. Boards,
Siding?
siding all over. And the second guy that owned it, he put chicken wire on it and plastered the whole thing.
Wow.
And this windmill was made out of wood.
Uh-huh.
And since then,
So it's been
they put a
replaced, but
metal one up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Was there any changes to the front of the place?
No, no.
Like you were saying there was some siding or clap siding
Oh, well.
on the porch area?
Yeah, they did have a solid boards.
Okay.
And I put the pickets on, or whatever you want to call it,
Okay.
and the hand railing.
Have you found anything on your property that kind of dates back to the 1800s?
Well, when I first moved here, I went out in the attic because we put soundproofing up there and for the heat and everything. And I found a paper that was 18 something, 1888 or 9 or something
Would
like
it have been a newspaper at that time, maybe?
Well,
or-
it's kind of like some of the newspapers we have around here, the little ones. Now that's the hotel across the street, which was on the corner.
And I heard you have an outhouse on this property.
Yeah, and that's it right there behind you.
And it's still working to this day?
Yeah,
Wow.
it's kind of dirty in there. So if you go in there, be sure you flush it. There's no flusher in there.
Now, you know, we saw that photo of the hotel. Tell me a little bit about the hotel.
Well, the hotel was originally R.E. Nichols' home. Toward the back was the two-story portion that was his home, and in the front, a brick area that was a general merchandise store. And when he decided later to build his own other home across the street, he converted this into a lavish Victorian structure. He built verandas all around, a second story on the general merchandise portion, and opened it to paying guests.
Now, that hotel, it had a rather peculiar demise. What happened with it?
Well, it's still a little bit of a mystery, but something happened with the keeper of the store, and the funds that he had been keeping mysteriously disappeared.
Okay.
And he said he could find them, but the next thing you knew, the hotel was burning down.
And that was along about 1945, right?
That's correct.
Well, I guess an unsolved mystery out there in Acton.
That's correct.
Now, let's go, I guess it's pretty much kind of across and down the street, and we're going to go take a look at the old Acton Community Presbyterian Church with Reverend Judith.
Welcome to Acton's historic Community Presbyterian Church. It started on April 28th, 1888. Met in homes and various other buildings in town. Started at as the original name of the organization was the Acton Religious and Moral Society. It started with about 35 people, most of whom have their names on the streets in this town. And they elected a president and a secretary because it was a society. That's what they started. The very first text that was used by Reverend Robbins, who was the first preacher, was in Romans 8:28, for all things work together for good to those who love the Lord, who are the called according to God's purposes. And they kept attendance. And the second Sunday, they decided to start a Sunday school because they had enough children. And the third week, they decided to pay 50 cents a week to buy an organ. And because they met in different places, it was, of course, a pump organ, and it was heavy but nevertheless movable, and so they would put it in the back of an old truck and take it to or a wagon, and take it to wherever church was going to meet. The society was going to meet that particular Sunday, and then they would unload the organ and they would have music with their services. We have the original Bible that was given to the church on the Sunday that it was dedicated. We have that original minute book. And I think if you really check the records, a whole lot of families that have lived and died in this town have been married here and have been buried from this church. You've already seen the school building. That was built specifically for one half to be used for the children of Acton and the other half to be used for the Acton Church. That was why it was built the way it was. They had no problem with the separation of church and state, obviously, in those days. This church became a Presbyterian church in 1916. It became incorporated in 1923 as the Acton Community Presbyterian Church, and it was on that occasion when we became an incorporated not-for-profit, believe me, that's what it is, a not-for-profit organization. This building was dedicated in June of 1924. It is built completely of redwood. All the studs, everything, the subroofing, everything is solid redwood. This pulpit, which is solid oak, was hand-carved out of a single piece of oak by a gentleman in the Wilshire Presbyterian Church when this church building was built. The chairs that you see on the platform in the chancel are older than the building. They're close to 100 years old. The communion table is also oak, and it's so much darker than this just by virtue of its age. In 1988, we completely stripped the inside of this building. The old wallboard was cracked and dirty and awful looking, and we knew we needed to do something. The building was not insulated. The only insulation in the walls was wadded up newspapers, which was a very common way of insulating buildings back in the early 1900s. So we gutted this whole thing and we put insulation in the walls. And for the first time in the history of this building, that Christmas, we had to turn the heat down because it was too warm in here. The hall was built in 1958. And it was built of, and this is a hoot, this is really a hoot, it was built of everything throwaway that anybody could collect. The cement block, the acoustical tile on the ceiling, everything was throwaway quality. Well, when we redid the inside of the hall, which we did about 2.5 or 3 years ago, we were real concerned about asbestos. So Pat Girl's husband and her sons took a sample carefully and had it tested, and because it was such sub-quality in its day, there was no asbestos in it, see? So the Lord works in mysterious ways.
Okay, well, from the church, tell us what our next stop is.
Okay, our next stop is we're going to be going up Crown Valley towards the 14 freeway and then making a left down Aliso towards the Acton Cemetery.
The cemetery. Well, sounds interesting. Let's take a look.
This is the Acton Cemetery, which consists of the original 10 acres, plus there's been some acreage added onto. The main part of the old cemetery is clear at the back. And it has graves that go back to the late 1800s, early 1800s. There is a section. This used to be a rectangular shaped piece of property. When they got ready to build this housing tract over here, it was discovered that back in that far corner, they had a problem. And the problem was that there was graves there. And the graves were not marked in any way, shape, or form. They just, here's these indentations in the ground. So we knew that there was graves there. Well, it turned out in checking through history that that's where the old Chinese slaves were buried. They worked on the railroad and so forth. And some of the Chinese worked in the mines, the local mines around here. So that's their area back there in the corner. So basically the fence on the east side goes down and then goes back in, and I think there's about 3/4 of an acre back there that they've set aside for the Chinese. They still bury people in here to this date. You know, most of your late graves are on that hill there, and they're scattered throughout the forest here. This is Larry Kwasniewski. I don't remember how many of you remember Marge Dunnett that worked at the bank. Well, this is her husband. Up on the hill there is a lot of the local townspeople that Carol Wiseman is buried up at the end there, and different townspeople throughout. There's one grave there, old Robbie Robinson. This area up here, you'll see a closed fenced area. That is the Milburn plot. all the Milburn family has a plot there. It's all fenced in, and they come over. You'll see the Milburn family here over here from time to time. They're in here taking care of that plot. And there's graves all through this area, all through the bushes here. You have to be careful where you bury people in here, because the water comes down through here and floods and everything else, and we don't want any people, you know, running down saying, "There goes Uncle Charlie down Crown Valley Road." The gate is locked, but there is a turnstile there that you came through, and you can come in here any time. And if you're ever down here in the evening time, be careful walking through here, because this is a haven for coyotes. There is a big coyote den down in the bottom part down there, and there has been mountain lion seen in here. There has been bobcat seen in here. This is where I live here. My property is called Tombstone Territory. It was a funny story about when we first moved in here. We first bought this property and moved in here. The kids used to come in here and party all the time, you know, and I was the local deputy sheriff. Well, I parked my radio car right next to the house. Well, the partying stopped.
The Duehren family, the last member of the Duehren family, deeded the property, the 10 acres that are now the Acton Cemetery, to the church, with the understanding that it would always be for the people of Acton. That's why the plots of the Acton Cemetery cost you nothing to all people who have lived in Acton at any time in their lives. We do request a donation. And oddly enough, it's the only cemetery, I think, in America where you can get a tax write-off for burying somebody there. And that is, you can make a donation to the cemetery fund of, and that's $150. And then we ask $150 to open and close the grave. So you can be buried in the Acton Cemetery for a grand total of $300.
All right, well, we heard that the heirs of this Mr. Duehren deeded the property for the cemetery over to the church. Who was this Duehren?
Well, he was actually the first permanent resident in Acton. He came in 1885, and as shortly as he could after that began building a home for his family.
Well, that's going to be our final stop on this tour, I believe.
Hi, I want to welcome you all here. The place here is known to be the first house built in Acton. It was built by a gentleman, a stonemason by the name of John Duehren, in the year of 1884. He began the cutting of these stones and bringing them down from the mountain, which is behind us. And he finished the house in 1887. I believe around the 1920s, there was a little bit of remodeling going on, and they had added bathrooms and side rooms and such. There was a time when a lot of this stone had fell down, and then it was reconstructed. And there was a stagecoach stop here. The stage came through and stopped here, and behind this building, there was actually a little general store as well. So the stage stopped, and the people got out, got a few supplies, and continued down the road to, I believe, the San Fernando Valley and through Ravenna and out, that way. When I bought the home, most of the inside of this house was in bad shape. It wasn't livable. As well as I had to remove their stagecoach stop, it just actually fell down. The carriage house behind me is where I do live presently. And as I'm living there, I'm maintaining it, trying to keep ahead of it, but it's a chore. It was basically put together with scrap wood. And when you go into these walls, it's just a chunk of wood here, or 1x6 or 1x3. That garage, which I call it the garage now, this is the main house, but I've kind of turned it into garage for storage of things that I'm going to be putting in this new house. And at one time, they called this place Withering Heights, and I renamed it Stagecoach Stop.
Well, I want to thank you guys and congratulate you for putting together quite an informative tour of old historic Acton. Tell me a little bit about the Acton Women's Club. What do you guys do?
We do a lot of fundraising, and we support 4 schools, Vasquez High School, High Desert Junior High, Acton Elementary, and Meadowlark Elementary.
Great. Well, I know a lot of the information about Acton comes from the book, Heritage Happenings by Merle Adams.
Yes, it does.
And tell me a little bit about this. This is available where?
You can look at the book at the library. It's no longer in print, so there are no copies available for sale, but they're in the LA County Public Library and the bookmobile.
Okay, well, good. There you go. For information about Acton, go check out, or can't check it out, but go look at Heritage Happenings by Merle Adams at the library. And also, you can stop by scvhistory.com on the internet, where you'll find lots of information about Santa Clarita Valley history and Acton history, or you can stop by the Saugus train station in downtown Newhall weekends 1 to 4. Thanks for joining us for this edition of Legacy, Santa Clarita's Living History. I'm Leon Warden. Good night.